Educational Information and Communication Technology presents Educational Satellite Television Programs.
Hello, teacher. Hello, students. Welcome to today's lesson. In our last lesson, we learned about evolution. Today, we will begin to learn about theories of evolution focusing on Lamarckian theory. Let us begin with an activity. Students, let us review what we have learned so far in this unit. Write down the definition of evolution on a sheet of notebook paper. When you have completed this, share your answer with your classmates.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back, students. Did you share your answers? As we have learned in our previous lessons, evolution is the change in the inherited traits in a population of organisms over time. We understand that this change occurs to the organism as well as in the organism's environment. Now that we know what evolution is, we must learn how it happens. For many years in Europe, Christians held a belief that God created the earth and all the species only a few thousand years ago. It was not until the 1700s when a man named George Buffon argued this idea. He thought that the earth was much older and that organisms changed over time randomly and in response to their environment. Buffon had a hard time trying to convince people this was true, since he had no evidence to show that his theory was right. In the beginning of the 1800s, a scientist named Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, who had read Buffon's theory, used his ideas to explain evolution. Lamarck is considered to be one of the first people to make an important advance in the study of evolution because he proposed a method by which changes in species might be made. He published a paper called Philosophie zoologique, which described the theory of transformation, also called Lamarckism. His theory described a two-part method by which change was introduced into a species and passed through generations of the species. The two parts of his theory are use and disuse and inheritance of acquired traits. Let us start by talking about use and disuse. The first notion of Lamarckian theory is use and disuse. In this theory, species lose characteristics they do not require or do not use. On the other hand, species also develop traits that are useful. A common example that Lamarck used to explain the notion of use and disuse is in the neck of a giraffe. According to Lamarck, a giraffe that must stretch its neck to reach higher branches could develop a longer neck over time. Although he could not scientifically describe how it happened, Lamarck talked about how species have a natural tendency towards perfection. Another example that Lamarck often used was the feet of water birds, like ducks. He stated that over years, birds that spent a lot of time in the water developed webbed feet to help them swim. These are only two examples of the changes many animals have made in order to become better equipped to survive. For our next activity, students, can you think of an animal that has a specific trait that helps it survive?
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back, students. There are many different examples that you can list. A few examples of traits that help animals survive are a zebra's stripes. The black and white stripes allow the animal to camouflage in the tall grass and confuse predators when they are being chased. Another example is of an ostrich's long legs and neck. Since they are birds that cannot fly, they must rely on their legs to keep away from predators. Their long legs help them to move quickly, and their long neck balances their body when they are running. Let us move on to the next part of Lamarckian theory. The second notion of Lamarckian theory is the inheritance of traits. This part of the theory states that traits changed or obtained during a species' life could be passed on to its offspring. Think back to the example of the giraffe we mentioned earlier. If a giraffe developed a long neck during its life, then, according to Lamarckian theory, it would pass on the trait of having a long neck to its offspring. This is referred to as Lamarckian inheritance. Unfortunately, this part of Lamarck's theory has been proven wrong. It is now known that adaptations species make in their lifetime cannot change the physiology of a species, meaning the genes that get passed from generation to generation cannot be altered in the way Lamarck expressed in the notion of inheritance of traits. Lamarck continued to study different kinds of species over time to find out how traits could be passed on from one generation to another. By looking at the ancient species, specifically seashells, he noticed that the older they were, the simpler they looked. He stated that species started out simple and moved towards becoming more complex through generations. Although Lamarck's idea on inheritance may have been proven wrong, the idea that species are moving closer to perfection or are becoming more complex over time is still an idea that we believe today. For our last activity, students, can you please name the two methods in Jean-Baptiste Lamarck's theory of evolution? Once you have named the methods, describe each one in a sentence.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back, students. If you said that Lamarckian theory consists of the notions of use and disuse and the inheritance of acquired traits, then you are correct. Use and disuse is where species lose traits they do not require or use and develop characteristics that are useful. Inheritance of acquired traits describes how species inherit the traits of their ancestors. This is the end of our lesson today, students. To review, we learned about Lamarckian theory of evolution. We learned about the notion of use and disuse, which means a species loses traits it does not use and develops traits that are useful. We also learned about the notion of inheritance of acquired traits, which means that species inherit the traits of their ancestors. This notion was later proven wrong, as more knowledge about genes and physiology was gathered by scientists. Until next time, thank you, teacher. Thank you, students.